in traditional tropical astrology, Saturn is the planet that probably holds the most weight and focus in the birth and the transit chart. I honestly feel like if you had time to focus on nothing else but Saturn in astrology, you'll still pretty much be set, because it really indicates where the scenes of life are set and where the our focus is consumed. It's like where all the stresses and the pressures and the expectations of life are manifesting. So the way that Saturn can really manifest is through the voice of the critical parent, because Saturn is the archetype of paternal figures. So because it's on the axis of the moon with the mother. So this is why Saturn in the birth chart can hint a lot about childhood conditions and therefore childhood conditionings, and especially from these paternal figures in our lives. So it's also where we embody our paternal archetypes, and it's also therefore it's where we inherently feel a lot of responsibilities, where like a lot of expectations are placed on us. It's just where we feel the pressures of life to the fullest. Saturn, it can manifest through the voice of the critical parent, the voice and compulsiveness of the inner supervisor, because Saturn is at the top of the horoscope. It rules the midheaven with Capricorn. So this is like represents our ultimate potential. Well, it's also where like the tests of life come from. And like, because it's the last visible planet that we can see with our own eyes, the work that we do with Saturn and how successful we are with this determines how much reign we have over the rest of the outer planets, which we can't see. So this is where we go into the subconscious and unconscious. So the more like power and awareness and work we've completed with Saturn means that we'll have more power over these unseen. A quick overview of Saturn through the 12 astrological houses and how this energy may play out in your life, such as the stresses and the tests that it brings, and also some of the rewards that come with it. Because like I said before, it's where we face a hardship, but we know also from astrology that it's hardship and the tests in life that produce the most personal growth, and that's what we came here to do, is undertake the lessons of life. And because Saturn is like the management of the birth chart, that is the one that checks off that we've really undertaken and done these lessons and completed these lessons, to the best of our abilities. So first off, if you have Saturn, what are you doing, Pippi? Saturn in the first house can really affect the way that the individual self-expresses. There can be a heaviness or a restraint that's placed on the personality, and it can definitely be attributed a lot to the relationship with the father. So if the father was quite a strong and overbearing force, it definitely could have resulted in this internalization, and that there's definitely the feeling of being born with a lot of responsibility on their shoulders, and that it's existing at all times, and it can really cause a frequent melancholy as well, and also a tendency of self-punishment. There's a natural stoicism that comes, and with this type as well, there's like a solidness, but it can also be like remarked as a coldness or a detachment, which isn't true. It kind of just relates to that inherent sort of like self-restraint or hesitation at like fully demonstrating who they are inside. However, a lot of this develops into a profound maturity, and they tend to age backwards in life, in the sense that they experience kind of like the pressures of self-expectation and expression in the social world very prematurely, and it's not until they get older and feel more relaxed in themselves that they become more like liberal in the way that they let themselves feel and react and interact, and that this is when their vitality is really released. They also suffer a lot of health conditions because it relates to an ongoing melancholy, and they can feel it in the bones. And this is also where a lot of their instinct or intuition can come from as well. They'll say things like, I feel it in my bones, I feel it deep inside. And this is like a mature wisdom of old age. And there's a groundedness, a steadiness, a steady force of like natural power that will eventually come out of them. The less self-resonant and less self-conscious they are, and the more that they grow into their true, authentic inner self. So, if you have Saturn in the second house, it's possible that you have a lot of issues and struggles surrounding self worth, like inner issues with your own value system and the way that you see yourself in the world and what you are worthy and deserving of. And that this may have come from a childhood where you were deprived in some way. You may have grown up in difficult economic conditions or in a single parent household where like the times are really tough and you took that burden of responsibility on as an adult, and therefore this can play out through that kind of self-deprecating and self-depriving mindset, and that you really have to kind of build on feeling like those good feelings about yourself and be able to detach from the experiences in your life and look at what you've actually been able to achieve and build for yourself despite all this, because you do have a great amount of stamina, and you do have a great the stamina ability to keep going. There's the responsibility when it comes to finances mean that you're willing to work yourself to the bone to provide for dependents, and the law of compensation will eventually pay off for you in life. You just have to stay stay faithful that your hard work will pay off, because that is the law of compensation. So you can look a bit more into that. It's really interesting. Another struggle that you may have is with sensory overload. So your physical surroundings can become really loud and overbearing, and the volume of everything can be turned up to such a high degree that you really just need to get away from everything and go into the quiet. And that the more that you value yourself and value the physical body that you were born into, the more that you'll be able to see that you're truly in a temple that's worthy of worthy of being worshipped, and that you are the ultimate goddess of Aphrodite's grotto that has actually been elevated to the highest position in the horoscope because it's with Saturn. So just if you can work through the way any kind of guilt that you have associated with pleasure and feeling good about yourself, then this will also assist you in becoming more connected to who your authentic physical body and really the goddess that is inside, and that just patiently work through getting over those harsh judgments that you have conditioned about yourself, and it will really benefit you. When Saturn is in the third house, there's definitely a lot of pressure in the mind. There is the voice of the inner supervisor that's turned up at extreme volume, and all the senses and memories of failure and expectation become ruminations. It can be very hard to escape what can become a prison, but the mind with Saturn in the third is also the individual's greatest ally, and that the mind has a great stamina and a structural component that will take them very far in life. The problem is that it can also overload itself into a paralysis and be quite hard to manage. So that's definitely one of the tasks that comes with Saturn in the third, is learning to master the mind, and that to let go of a lot of the self-restraint that comes with communication. There can definitely be a blockage with verbal expression and sort of a difficulty with inhaling and exhaling, getting the words out properly. They could and also problems with becoming short of breath or just randomly stopping breathing, that inhale exhalation problem. And then when they talk, they can kind of become all I am sort of right now, all confused and can't really get their words out properly. That is really, thank you Saturn in the third, kind of displaying how this can come off really. There is a very ambitious quality to this mind, and one that wants to succeed and take you to the next level, develop the qualities of it, and that the more that you know, the more safe that you'll feel in this world, that once you dive into subjects, they seem less and less overwhelming. So your mind can definitely be a dark neighborhood that you don't want to go down, because it can make things seem quite threatening, but when you look into them, the opposite is true. Saturn has this weird way of luring you into subjects it wants you to take on, because these will assist you in how you will develop in life. Saturn in the third can also indicate a difficult experience with early education. There may have been a harsh experience with educators, especially masculine figures, so male teachers. There also could have been issues issues with bullying and issues with other siblings, especially if these were like a lot older. The person may have really felt like the outsider of the family as well. So for people with Saturn in the 4th house, when they were growing up, everything that they couldn't have, couldn't be, and couldn't achieve became everything that they want and everything that they need in life. It's possible that during childhood, the person felt like a real outsider. They felt alienated. They may have been disconnected from their family or felt like too much pressure or expectation was placed on them, especially the family lineage. They may feel like they were born into things and secrets that they don't want to know about or don't want to see or don't want to carry on and would like to break away from these things. There can definitely be a coldness when Saturn is in the 4th house. Like they're born into a world that didn't really want them or place them under this sort of expectation or spotlight that made them feel very uncomfortable and different, and therefore it was really hard for them to integrate into their full authentic self, and that they often have a very, very private nature, but they're usually not given the virtue or the respect for this. They're usually intruded upon by many people, and there's kind of not allowed this. They are naturally solitary people, but it just seems like they're not really afforded that in life either, and that they have a sensitivity to their domestic surroundings and their family, that they saw things and noticed and heard things that other siblings or family members didn't, and they kept a lot of these secret. They internalized that inside, and then they probably felt like there wasn't anybody that they could reveal these things to either. They probably feel like they lacked one parent figure in some form, and potentially this was a father figure. They may have felt like a figural or experienced a literal neglect, and that the mother is likely to have taken on some kind of authority figure in this way, so taken on that role, and therefore that could have put a lot of strain on that relationship too, because therefore the individual was missing like the fullness of the paternal in her life and the fullness that the maternal could have given her. So there's sort of like a lot that's missing that the individual has to really go within to build up inside. There can also be paralysis with the dream world, a tendency for a lot of nightmares, a lot of like rumination over bad events, and that there's kind of like an inner requirement to overcome the shame that they seem to have taken on from the events of their childhood, and that if they can find a way to honor the past without completely cutting themselves off from everything that it contributed to make them who they are, then they'll really be able to overcome a lot of the difficulties that they feel inside, and that the distrust will eventually turn into natural trust, and that the emotional lability that they have can develop into a profound emotional maturity as well, and that they'll be able to turn a new generational legacy. So for future descendants, they can really be a tremendous role model, and there's a lot of like potential in this. It's quite a harsh energy to be born with, but I also see these people are able to achieve a lot. With Saturn in the 5th house, one of the main challenges can be just the profound sensitivity that comes with this condition. These people are very sensitive to the reactions, responses, and interactions that they have with other people, that they sort of want to appear good in the eyes of other people. They don't, and they take criticism really harshly. Compliments actually don't resonate half near as much as a critique, and they'll really take it to heart. Their heart is really, really big, but the problem with Saturn in the 5th is that it kind of locks his heart away. It makes the person feel unworthy of receiving love and also giving it fully. And this can be the same with creativity as well. They can really tap into a tremendous resource of creativity that just keeps going and going and going. But the kind of pressure to start and the inner expectation that what they produce has to be good can really like put a lot of self-restraint on them as well. And that they have to really try and overcome the fear and the concern that they have with not looking good and with failing, because like I said before, they'll really, really take this to heart and feel like they really have to carry the whole show, and that everything is always left up to them, and that in the end, this can just cause them to reject themselves and reject who they are, and therefore it causes other people to reject them because they kind of feel like this person has so much potential, but they don't know how to draw it out of them either. So there can also be an issue with sexual confidence that has to be developed as well, a restraint in that way, and that just, it's great persistence that will really get the person through here, that just to try to let go of the pressure that the person puts on themselves in regard to sexual performance, and that it doesn't have to be so much about how the other person responds to that, because they kind of take on all the responsibility in like sexual relationships as well, how the other person is feeling, and therefore that's another quality of self-deprivation. So they really have to let go of that self-resonance that they have, that they're not attractive, they're not lovable, that they're unlucky, they're just fated to fortune. They're able to take measured and calculated risks, and when they do this, those always pay off. They just have to develop that confidence in themselves, and the more that they do things and put themselves out there, the more that comes. Sixth house can definitely take on too many responsibilities. They sort of take on way too many tasks and duties for themselves. They place expectations on themselves that are beyond human, and a lot of it relates to if they feel like they're good enough for this world, if they have actual qualities that really make a decent contribution, and they'll work very hard on these as well, and they should be very proud of the efforts that they put in to constantly upskill, but they're kind of always led to look down the negative side of themselves and the qualities that they don't have and the talents that they don't possess, rather than the ones that they do. There's a great ability with people that Saturn in the sixth house have to help other people through the most difficult and darkest times of their lives, and they have a way of that's like patient with people, and that sees the best of them, and that is willing to wait for the best outcome for both of you. And that is a really tremendous quality that should be remarked upon, because it's often overlooked as well. They sort of have a tendency to take on the hard jobs, the tough jobs. They'll stay back late, but this can also relate to a lot of anxiety when it comes to their employment. They may feel constantly like their job is always on the line, or that a job loss can be quite traumatic for them, because it helps them feel in that daily structure. They have a lot of mental and physical stamina. They really need a very big outlet for all of that energy, and when they don't have that, they literally feel like they're going to lose their mind. So the task, one of the biggest tasks for Saturn in the sixth house people, is turning that anxiety into a sense of stoic calmness that's able to pull everybody into that grounded medium, and this is really where they function best in the end anyway. So having Saturn in the 7th house can definitely spell out a lot of difficulty and trouble in relationships. Interactions with other people is often where all the trouble and the trauma from life comes from, and that the projection that Saturn in the 7th house puts out into the world is one of a threatening domination, and this is what they see back in other people. They can always feel like they may be unliked, they're unworthy of having like good relationships, and it's because, like I said before, that Saturn is the archetype of the paternal archetype. It means that difficulties with the father and the father figure in early life will keep replaying out in relationships with people, because they will attract these people into their lives to finally overcome those lessons and those hardships and that loss that they experienced as a child. Or if it wasn't a loss, then it could have been the restraint that's placed on how the individual sees themselves or feels like what they need or deserve out of a relationship. And that there can be a very strong fear of rejection that causes them to just internalize and really not put themselves out there, that they have a really strong desire for cooperation and connecting with other people, but it's kind of this voice of self-resonance, this feeling like they don't belong or they can't ever belong, or that voice inside that tells them that these people don't like them or is suspicious. And these are just more projections that they've kind of been conditioned with over their life, and that eventually that they develop a way to approach relationships with a really wise maturity, and they're able to use the tools that once caused them to reject people as tools of discrimination at who they let into their lives. And eventually it gets to a point where they're able to discriminate so well that they don't let in people that hurt them, and because they've overcome the lessons of the past, and that person who kept reappearing in different figures has finally stopped. There can be a strong fear of commitment as well, but there can also be the opposite is true, and that the person may feel so desperate to be accepted and loved that they keep on entering unhealthy relationships where the other person has no intention of committing to them, and this will kind of just keep the cycle of desperation, and a lack of value in themselves keeps going. They may be like, have a tendency to overcompromise in their relationships, always kind of never stand up for themselves, let their partner win the argument because they're so scared of what could happen if they do. And this isn't really healthy for anybody. They approach relationships with a maturity, and they need a person that is able to do this. Because Saturn represents older figures as well, it's possible that they enter relationships that have quite a generational gap, but this doesn't exactly mean that it's a leftover issue from childhood either. It could be that they naturally appreciate the maturity and the wisdom of older people, or enjoy being that mature, wise mentor for somebody younger, and that the most important thing is mutual respect in relationships, and that they will eventually reach a stage where relationships are just rewarding and not so overwhelming. So Saturn in the 8th house can really struggle with developing the strong, intimate connections that they so desire, and that there can be such a sense of responsibility and restraint that surrounds sexual, intimate relationships that it really just puts a force of separation between the pair, and that the urge is to create long-lasting, meaningful legacy, but there can also be such a sensitivity to the reactions and rejections of other people that there's also a strong distrust, a natural sense of feeling that other people will betray them. So they really place so many barriers up that restrict the fullness of this experience, and that's something that they really have to develop across a lifetime, is really that ability to surrender and to just let go of those defenses and let somebody else inside. The intuition with Saturn in the 8th house is really profound, really powerful. It's definitely been inherited from a strong generational legacy. The problem is that it can be too strong and overwhelming, and because of that fear of letting go and release, that they can be too fearful to actually convey what they think and know and have intuitively uncovered, because they may be afraid that they'll be remarked on as being insane, or that people will just think that they've lost it. It's really, really strong. They have a really strong radar there, and that because Saturn always has to master things, they definitely can develop this into a profound mediumship that is almost entirely accurate, but they just have to kind of work persistently at developing any intuitive abilities and let go of any fears that they have that people won't respect them because of this. It's kind of like a self-consciousness thing that they have, and this can relate to kind of that fear of insanity that can follow them from an early age, and that they know that invisible worlds exist. It's like an inherent thing, but they just have to let go of all the conditioning that stops them from completely accessing them. Because once they do, things can be totally wicked and wild. Like Saturn in the 3rd, because it's on the same axis, Saturn in the 9th house puts a lot of pressure onto the mind, and a lot of pressure on the mind to succeed, achieve, and in 9th house themes such as in higher education, so university, so it's usually quite imperative for this person to get a degree, and if they do, because Saturn that's Pippi. Do you want to come over here, Pippi? Because Saturn obstructs the path. Hold on, sorry. There we go. It means that it can take them a long while to actually get through university. There could be events that obstruct their path there and that take a long time. They may feel like they keep choosing the wrong course, but once they start, they have to finish. It's kind of like this expectation on them. there's usually a high amount of skepticism that if you just like dig more beneath it, it's a great philosophical mind, and it has to really get to the bottom of things. It doubts things, it doubts those otherworldly studies, because that doubt is what drives them to look deeper into it and find out what the actual truth is. So this is what can make them great masters at those ninth house topics. Anything that's in the esoteric and spiritual realms, and that's intellectually based, like astrology and alchemy and any kind of philosophical studies, they can certainly master these, and they're able to master any educational pursuits that they undertake as well. Whatever they do, when they put their mind to it, they're really in it for the long run. But this is also where a lot of the trouble comes as well. The ninth house is ruled by Sagittarius, so it's where we experience natural joy and pleasure. So there can be a deep depression in this mind, a natural one, really, a melancholy, and that's only kind of satisfied itself when it's gone down into these realms, into these Saturn realms, and it's like source the wisdom and able to come back out of it. It can only, this is like an energy that can only feel good if it has all the forces of the universe behind it. There's usually a lot of respect for orthodox and traditional religions. The individual is usually raised in such a place, but obviously was usually raised in a religious household, but can question it, deeply question it from an early age and leave it. And then by nature, through all the teachings and natural education, just find a way back to it in some way. It won't be exactly the same way, but those symbols and everything that they saw as a child, it has an impact on them. This is definitely the minds of great philosophers. The best astrologers like Liz Green and Stephen Forrest, they have Saturn in the ninth house. So that just shows how far that these people can really go in life. Okay, so Saturn in the 10th house is a hard one. These people really feel like they were born into a world of responsibility. But the magical thing with Saturn in the 10th house is that their life path is actually the same as their spiritual path. It's like a pilgrimage that they're undertaking in life, reaching the top of the horoscope, and they often don't even realize it. That's why their life happens at an enduring pace. So things seem to be quite slow from them, and that's why we learn about the hardships and the troubles of life for them, that survival really is of the fittest, and they display a stoicism that proves that it doesn't really matter where you come from in life, that you can still make a big impact. They show how important it is to overcome that negative mindset and any sort of victim mentality that you put on yourself, that no matter what it is, you are capable of achieving despite the odds. And this may have come from having a father that was quite a decent role model, that really was able to display all the positive attributes of being an authority figure, and that was disciplined but in a fair way. And this was obviously very positive if that happened. On the other hand, the father may have been very strict, very stern, and placed so much expectation on the child. This will play out in the myth of Saturn, where Saturn eats his children. So this often means that there is such an expectation and a name to live up to that it totally consumes the child and then adult's life, that they can never really be their full selves. They can never go after their own dreams and their own ambitions. So this is one of the main troubles with Saturn in the 10th house, and that's at some point they have to learn that they don't have to listen to anything. Sometimes they can go their own ways in life, and that sometimes they can question authority, that they don't have to do everything by the book, and that the more that they do that and come into their authentic selves, the more that they'll actually achieve, and it will be achieving on their own terms, because in the end that's what they really are seeking. They're kind of led to believe that once they receive all the adoration from the world, that those feelings inside will go away. But really it's them, it's that own paternal archetype within them that has to just say, okay, you've done well, I'm proud of you. And that's when they really know that they've achieved and now feel so satisfied in life. It's really possible with this condition to achieve so much and feel so satisfied in the end. So with Saturn in the 11th house, it's possible that a lot of the troubles in early life came from fitting in with other people. They may have been rejected from friendship groups and made to feel like real outsiders and real like they were so different. And because they do have an unconventional base persona, it really may have been difficult to find their niche and to find their tribe. That's why it really is so important that they hold on to what's different about themselves, because eventually they do become rewarded with finding that group of people that do appreciate them for who they are inside. They feel a kind of distance from people and humanity at large. There could be a general frustration or agitation. This is because they're actually very humanitarian minded. They are generous in the sense that they don't want to place too much, like they don't want the world to consume too much or do too much just because of them. They don't want to leave too much of like a footprint, if that makes sense. They kind of like want to leave this earth as they came. There's this kind of like strange dichotomy. So one of the main struggles for Saturn in the 12th house can be carrying around a lot of guilt. And it's guilt for the traumas and the experiences of like past life ancestors and how this is manifested in current day. And there can be like this real inherent responsibility that they have to save the world, and that all that is placed on their shoulders, and that it's almost too overwhelming for them. There's a very spiritual nature to these people and a desire to find that higher spiritual authority to lead them through life. But really they have to discover that this will come from inside. And this is why they are forced into solitude so much. A Saturn in the 12th house life can be quite a lonely one, because under these conditions, they're forced into exile so that they're able to garner and realize and recognize that invisible support network and access those other worlds that have always been there. And that once they do this, then once they find their true home, then it has a way of making them feel more at home in this world. These people are very, very giving and naturally compassionate. Selflessness comes so easily that they often give too much of themselves out. They really have to put up boundaries that stop other people from really absorbing all the power, all the compassion, all the sensitivity that they have, because there's really so much in there. The father may have been quite an absent force. The father may have struggled with some kind of substances. It may not have been a completely like negative because of this. It could have just been like an absence in some kind of way that manifests itself through a rejection of current relationships and feeling just a whole lot of responsibility for fixing everybody that experienced the same thing growing up, and also a tendency to attract people who have also experienced a kind of dysfunction in that stage of life, but have not worked through it. So they can really come face to face with older versions of themselves that were struggling with that pain. They really have to let go of any blame that they've accumulated for those things happening in their lives, and just let that wise maturity that's so natural come to them, that their actually inherent sense of failure, that these are just like conditions that they've formed by having one foot in a fantasy world and one foot in the real world, and because they've been confused and haven't had anyone to guide them, both of them have been mixed up. So the most important thing for Saturn in the 12th is definitely solitude, being comfortable in solitude, being comfortable with being alone, therefore getting to know themselves deeper and undertaking those lessons of Saturn. And then those feelings of exile and solitude won't feel so lonely, because they know they're never alone.